me here today is a zealous, vibrant young lady raised in Accra, Newtown, a typical Zongo community, a product of Youngsters International School, Hamdania Islamic School, Achimota Secondary School, and University of Ghana Medical School. Currently, a captain with the Ghana Armed Forces and also a medic at 37 Military Hospital right here in Accra.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. All praise is due to the one and only. He is the master.
This program is powered by Halal Events.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Dr. Hajara in Futa. I'm a medical doctor in the Ghana Armed Forces. I come from a family of 10, my parents, and then I have 7 siblings. I have 2 sisters and 5 brothers. I grew up in Accra, Newtown in the 90s. I stayed with my parents throughout. I had my secular education at the Youngsters International School, that's for my basic education, and then Hamdania Islamic School for my Islamic education. My parents are Alhaja Futa and Hajara Futa, and they have been very impactful in my life throughout my education and my career. So growing up in Newtown in the 90s, for me, I was someone who was very reserved, so I didn't really interact much with other kids in the neighborhood. I think my life was basically like from school, back to home, back to Makaranta, and that's just how it has been for me. I mean, my spare time, I think I spent it in my mom's shop. She had a provision shop that was just attached to her house, so that was how it was for me growing up. So at that time, that was towards early 2000s. I think that was when Sakawa came and it was a thing. I mean, I knew quite a number of young people who used to spend their time in internet cafes. At the time, they used to call it, what was the name they called it? I think it was either chatting or Yahoo. I've forgotten the way they used to call it, but that was what they used to do in those days. We had friends who come to school at Makaranta, and before we closed, they've already run to spend their time in the internet cafes. And those who spend their time, who used to go around instead of being at home after school. But for me, because of my upbringing, my parents were quite strict, so we didn't have that luxury or that freedom to be going around aimlessly. But my parents knew they had a responsibility to take care of all of us, knowing that this is what they had. It was a large number. At the time, we weren't that many, but after the 2000s, our numbers kept on increasing. And they did the best they could, and Allah helped them to achieve their aim. So for me, we mostly grew up with our parents. We were at home with my parents. And the only time we spent outside our home was probably on holidays, when we went to spend maybe a week or 2 with my grandparents. Otherwise, we just spent our time with my parents. And growing up in Newtown, we saw our cousins very often because after school we're together till their parents come for them when we close from school. So we spent a lot of time with, it wasn't just my siblings, our cousins as well. So now I still wonder how Muslim kids do it, and I wondered how we're able to go through it. Going to school for 5 days a week and then having to spend 2 days in Makaranta, it wasn't easy at all. It's like there is no break. The only break you have is on holidays or during vacation. And I don't know how we managed to go through, because I think even as I look at myself as an adult now, having to go to work sometimes 7 days a week, I think it's very stressful. And I commend Muslim parents who choose to take their kids to school, for secular education, and both secular and Islamic education, because it's not easy at all for the children. I'm going to school 5 days a week and then spending 2 days. And there is really no easy way out. You can't request that Muslim kids go to school for 4 days and then rest on Friday so that they can go to Makaranta Saturday and Sunday. And you can't request that they miss Makaranta so that they can make all the days for school. When we were going higher in the secular education, our Makaranta was a bit hard for us to combine the two, because entering secondary school, going to boarding houses means we had to miss our Saturdays and Sundays. But I think we still struggle through, and there is still more room for us to improve on in terms of balancing that for our Muslim children. I felt like the time we spent wasn't adequate, because 2 days in a week was definitely not adequate when you had a lot of things to study. And sometimes because we miss some of the weekends when you come, maybe your colleagues might have gone ahead of you, or maybe sometimes you come and it looks like you may have to go back on things that have been studied in your absence. I mean, I think that was one of the challenges that I faced. And I mean, really, you can't blame anyone for it because that is the system in which we are. So back in Ashimota School, I was the only Muslim in my class. We were about 40. And there was this incident when a student from a different class came to my class that he wanted to preach to us. And he asked if there was any Muslim in the class, and I said yes, I was there. And then he said he had something to say which was going to offend me, but I should just take it like that. And I said no, I won't tolerate that. I mean, you're coming to my class to tell me something that's going to offend me. I don't think it's okay. So it became a bit of back and forth with us. Eventually, I made sure that I stood my ground and made myself visible so that anybody who tried that next time knew what the person was up against. And that is how I managed to make myself visible, being the only person among 40 non-Muslims in the class. But aside that, I think it was a nice period. I mean, it was a period of discovery for me, because there are sessions that they had for us as students where we had resource persons talk to us about being assertive, knowing who we were, being comfortable with who we were. Because I mean, as adolescents and teenagers in boarding school, sometimes it's hard accepting who we are, and people try to copy others or try to fit in, try to live in a way that is not that's not who they are, trying to just impress others. And so these sessions that we had from time to time helped us accept who we were and then be comfortable in that. The social population was quite small, but I mean, it was small in other classes. I mean, I don't know, probably there are a few classes that didn't have any Muslims at all, because in all we're about if we take, let's say, Form 1 to Form 3, we're about 50 or 60. So I think that puts it at about 2 per class. Yeah, about 2 or 3 per class. Some classes had more, others had less. But in my class, I was the only one. GYMSA at that time was important in helping us come together. So being such a minority was important to be united. And then it was a time for us to read more about our religion. Because growing up, most of what we knew was what we were taught in Makaranta. We didn't really spend time to do our own personal reading. But with GYMSA, every week they select one person to come and lead our grouping, should I say service, Muslim service. And if you are the person supposed to lead, you have to go and do your homework, like by reading around Islam and things, and that helps to broaden your scope. So I think it was important. So going to boarding school, I was very excited because I have older siblings who have been to the boarding school, and they always come and tell us stories of how it is to have your own chop box, how you have lights, house, entertainment and all that. And I felt like that was my first chance at being independent, not being like directly under my parents 24/7. So I think it was an exciting period for me. And one thing I took upon like as a challenge for me entering SS was, I mean, growing up at home, our parents remind us to pray all the time, but you know, kids can be lazy sometimes. And I knew by the time I finished SS, I was coming out as an adult, like 17, 18. And I wanted to use that period to get my salah, like be conscious of it, so that I don't have to wait for someone to remind me before I do it. So I felt like that was a period to use to get punctual with it, even if not on time exactly, but at least making sure that every single day I complete all my 5 prayers. So as a general science student, I was stronger in the maths than with the reading subjects. And our electives at the time were biology, physics, chemistry, and then elective maths. Physics was closer to maths, but the biology and chemistry were more of reading. And I mean, I was good at chemistry as well, but biology wasn't. I felt like I would prefer to do something that was more math oriented. So coming out of secondary school, I was considering probably engineering, actuarial science, and then I also had medicine in the list, but that wasn't my top option. So I bought my university forms. I filled in the subjects I wanted to do. I had medicine there, but my main option at the time was actuarial science, because I heard it was a new course for people who were math oriented. But I didn't know many people who were in the field, so it was quite hard relating to it and knowing how it will be in terms of job security. I don't know how it is now, but at the time I didn't know many people who were in the field. And in contrast with medicine, where I knew quite a few doctors, so deciding to do medicine, my parents actually had to help me with that decision, because it was quite hard for me to make that decision. So I entered University of Ghana in 2009 with RG 6. So I was here at the time, it was 8 subjects. I had 6 A's and then the others were 2 B's. And I read biological science at the time, because during those days you couldn't enter straight as a medical student. You have to do biological science for a year and then afterwards, based on our GPA, we had to go for do an aptitude test and an interview before entering the medical school. So I went through all these stages before entering the medical school the following year, which was 2010. So in medical school as well, the Muslims in my class at the time, I think we were only 5. I was the only female at the time, and I really wish we had more female Muslims in the class, because I kind of felt alone at that period. You know, in university in Ghana, a lot of the times you will be in class and then somebody will come and start preaching and all those things, and you're supposed to stay and listen to what they are saying, even though they may be saying things that you find insulting. And I thought, I mean, if we were more in the system, those things would be probably controlled. And aside that, the academics wasn't it wasn't a walk in the park. It wasn't easy at all, because there's a stark contrast between what we learn, like what we are learning in medical school, and what you just finished learning in biological science. Even though they tell you are building towards it, but you realize that it's just different. I mean, in level 100, you get used to the freedom of having to choose your times, your lecture schedules, when you want to have your free time, when you want to have your lectures and all that. And can you have a free day? But in medical school, it's like you are back to primary school, because you have to sit in class from morning to, let's say, 11, go on break, come back, and that's how it is for everyone. And the volume of work he has to learn was challenging. And the studies over there is, I mean, our lecture tell us it's more of an apprenticeship. So you have to learn under somebody. It's not about just picking your books and learning and scoring the A's. It's more practical. You have to learn the procedures, learn what is expected of you from your superiors. And I mean, we went through it. It wasn't easy, but we went through it.
I know we can if we believe.
Halal Events. Know the difference.
I entered medical school in the year 2010, and for that period, I mean, it was a very different place, because it wasn't like our usual lecture schedules back in University of Ghana. I remember the one incident which happened. I think that was our first IA we did. That was in anatomy. So first, the exam is of 2 parts. There is the theory and then the practical part. At the end of the exam, I think about a week or so after, our results came out. And for the theory, I think I had the mark I had. I was very, very surprised, actually, because I was not used to getting that kind of grades. My grades have always been, if not A's or A minus, at worst a B plus. So I was surprised at the mark that I got. So that night in my bed, I wept, because I was wondering if I had made the wrong decision, if I was in the wrong place. And I just wept that night. Came back the next day hoping that things would be different. Then when they finally brought the practical part, the mark was even worse than the first one. So I decided that I'm not shedding any more tears in this medical school. I'll just put in more effort and go through it. And it was, I think that moment was very necessary for me, because it made me realize where exactly I was and what was expected of me. That I had to put in more effort than I was putting in biological science or even in high school. One other thing was, in medical school, I mean, the student body knew that it was tough being there. It wasn't like our relaxed schedules in the main campuses. So, I mean, every semester there is like a final year, and you're expected to remember everything that you've learned right from the first year, because it will be applied even when you start working. You don't finish a semester and then that is the end of it. So one thing we did as students was find ways of making things less stressful for us. So we had a lot of extracurricular activities organized by the student body. We had, I mean, almost every Friday there was something going on, just to take our minds off our stressful schedules. One of the big programs we had was Momic, where we have a whole night with a stage and all the lighting with our microphones and everything. We come and do performances, mimic our lecturers. I mean, just have fun. I mean, that was the ways for us to relieve stress. I finished medical school in 2015 and then started my housemanship in the year 2016. Housemanship is a period where it's like, even though you finish medical school, you've learned all the things in class, mean, medical school, out of the 6 years, you spend the first 3 years in class learning the theoretical aspects and then doing some practicals. And then the last 3 years is meant for clinicals, where you actually interact with patients. So you take history from them, clerk patients, examine them, discuss their management with your superiors, so that by the time you are done with school, you have an idea of what is expected. Then after that, because you are dealing with human life, that is still not enough. You have to do some years of housemanship where you actually learn on the job. So housemanship is a period of learning, even though you are working, but it's more of it's still an apprenticeship. So you have to work under a superior. It's usually done in a teaching hospital, so like where you have a lot of consultants to train you. And so I did my first year in Kolebu, and then my second year I did it in Ridge Hospital. After medical school and housemanship, there are many options available. I mean, in terms of career, you could choose to work with the Ghana Health Service, or even go private, or sample travel abroad. I mean, all these options are available. And the career path for doctors, I mean, aside, you could just choose to remain as a medical officer and then grow in that field, where you become a senior medical officer, principal medical officer, and district director of health. Or you could choose to specialize, which, I mean, with that, you don't just remain as a medical officer, you take one particular field of medicine and then become an expert in that field. So which is what most of my colleagues are doing, choosing to specialize. And even with that, you could choose to work as in a private facility or in a government facility. And other options available, I mean, you could travel abroad and specialize there, or stay there, or even work here. And the military is one of the options that are available. So for me, it wasn't a decision that I had planned years ahead. Even though, I mean, back in high school, I was in the cadet course, but after school, I didn't really make much of it. I didn't plan on joining the military because I was in the cadets in high school. I mean, it's just happened that after finishing housemanship and considering the options that I had, I thought, well, maybe if I should look in that direction, it would be a good option. Because I wanted to work in the military hospital in 37, and I mean, I was informed by some friends that it would be better for me to join the military if I wanted to work there than just be a civilian employee, because there were certain benefits in terms of incentives. So I considered that. So being in the military is like I was doing two jobs at the same time. I'm a military officer, at the same time a medical doctor. So I felt like that was give me more opportunities than just being one. So I joined the military as a medical doctor, meaning my training was supposed to last for about 5-6 months. And then after the training period, I had to do regimentals for 6 months before coming back into medical practice. So that meant about a year break from medical practice. And I mean, that is how the system is. And coming back into the system, it takes time to adjust, but I think it's going on well. Being a medical doctor in the military means that aside your work as a medical doctor, you'd have certain functions that are military. So, I mean, for instance, aside in the hospital, I work as a medical officer, but if there is a need for any medical cover, I mean, if there are civilian doctors and there's a military doctor, I would have to go in place of that person. So, I mean, those are one of the things that differentiates a medical doctor, a civilian from a military doctor. And aside that, as part of our work as military doctors, we have to go on peacekeeping when the need be. So if Ghana is supposed to go for peacekeeping, we provide a medical cover in those foreign countries during the period. So we are providing medical services for military personnel, and being a military doctor means that you have certain basic skills of a military person, so that in times of, let's say, war, when you're at the battleground and you are attacked by the opponents, or you can also protect yourself instead of fully depending on the other soldiers to do that for you. So as part of the military training, you are supposed to, know how to use weapons and certain basic skills, at least for your own protection. So for like a typical medical officer, in the morning I report to work by 8. I'm supposed to review the patients with the house officers. If there are any plans to be taken, we execute them, and then I report to my bosses, and if there is any input they want to add, we do it, and I report back to them if everything is okay. So I mean, for the patients on the ward, I mean, you don't just finish with them one day, you are done. So every day is a continuation of the previous day. Yeah, even if you are not at work, I mean, you just keep in mind that you may be needed to for any information of the patients around. So my understanding of a role model is someone you look up to inspire you to take certain decisions in life. For me, if I'm looking for a role model, I'll look out for someone who has achieved excellence in their personal life, and then in their career, and then in their faith. Those are the three things I think you should look out for. So I believe there are many people around who can be role models, even if they are not acting as such, but they can be role models. But perhaps you don't know about them, but there are many people around that if you look around, there are many Muslims who have, I mean, I think unlike in the past where the educated ones were not that many, or those who are achieving certain like heights in their education and in their career were many, I think now there are quite a number of Muslim achievers who, if approached, could be role models for younger ones coming up. And even with being role model, you might not even know the person yourself, but sometimes when someone hears about you, it could inspire them to also want to be like you. So I think it's all part of it. So for me, I think whatever path I've taken has always been God's plan for me, because even right from primary school, deciding to do science in secondary school was not something that was straightforward for me. It wasn't like I didn't have any interest in science at all, but I was someone who was all around, so I think it was God's plan for me to move in the direction in which I went. Finishing secondary school, I didn't plan to end up in the medical school because I was thinking that being someone who is more math inclined, even my colleagues thought I would go to do engineering or something math inclined, but I ended up doing medicine. After finishing medical school, doing my housemanship, my main plan wasn't to join the military because I felt like there were many options available, but I mean, everything God does is just perfect, so that's how I see it. Most of my decisions that I took, I mean, aside considering my situation, my parents helped a lot with that, because I mean, I knew other doctors around, but if it was just based on what I wanted to do, maybe I would have been more math inclined, something that was more math related. And me growing up, I just wanted to do something, I mean, have a good job, have a good career, good life, be a responsible person. That was it for me. So but I didn't have anybody in particular I was looking up to. If I had any, like, I didn't have any, let's say, a doctor I was looking up to be like in future. My decisions were mainly taken by, I mean, I took it together with my parents and looking at the situation that was at hand. I would like to specialize in pediatrics, that's child health, because I think it's an area where I have interest in. And I would like to go further maybe into neonatology, where you deal with very, very, very young ones like newborn babies, preterms. I just like them tiny. My message to the youth is to always be confident and know that whatever you want to achieve, you can once you give it a try. And don't feel like you are not good enough or there are people better than you out there. I mean, until you try, the answer is always no. So I mean, you should always keep the doors open for yourself. You never know what you achieve from that.
So we've heard from our captain, Dr. Hajara in Futa. Dare to be different. Do not limit yourself regardless of your background. You can make it.
This program is powered by Halal Events. Halal Events, know the difference.
All praise is due to